Chad Andrews here, the 33 Rule. We are rolling on with some amazing conversations with some fantastic people. And the reason why we have this next guest is I met this gentleman at Project Echelon's team camp, where I was kind of like a promotion marketing person, and I'm still doing that as we speak. And I met Eric Beach there, and I sat down, just happened to sit down with Eric, and at the I guess it was a coffee table. But without further ado, Eric, let's bring you in. Eric Beach. Eric, welcome to our conversation. I really appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, thank you. It was a great conversation on that coffee table, and one I didn't expect, but was really glad happened.
Yeah, it was just to give you guys kind of the backdrop. Eric and I sat down, and he was sitting at the other end, and I was sitting at the other end, and we just kind of struck up this organic conversation about his life and about my life, and we had some of the congruencies that we have going on. So first of all, Eric, tell us a little bit about you outside of being the founder of Project Echelon and Project Echelon Racing Team.
Yeah, I have been on a journey, so to speak, and it started in childhood all the way up into my motivation to joining the military in the U.S. Army in 2002, which, I joined that very much because I had some traumas in childhood that didn't really show me what it meant to be a man. So I thought the Army would do that in part. It did not do that. That wasn't the Army's job, but I deployed in 2003 to Iraq, was injured. In 2005, I was medically discharged and retired, and then kind of wallowed for many years in drug and alcohol abuse, trying to self-soothe and self-medicate to figure out who I was, unaware that I had this identity crisis. And in 2014, something like that, I had back in 2008, I actually attempted suicide because I just couldn't figure this out and realized, it was my physical body I thought I wanted to smash and get rid of, but really it was living this lie of being separated from authentic self. And that's what I've learned. And in 2014, I really started that journey with Eric Hill in triathlon, which was my way of getting physicality back in my life because I missed it from the military. I wanted to be back in the military. I couldn't. I had a wife and two daughters that weren't going to be supportive of that. And that's okay. That was just our journey, which is another big part, is that was what wasn't right for me to go back in the military. Not that it's wrong to do these things. So I had to figure something else out. It was the physicality I could bring back into my life, got on the bike, got on the road, got in the pool, and then started doing triathlon. And then after my first one, Eric Hill and I created Project Echelon because it helped me so much rediscover my purpose through physicality, which then opened up the other realms of possibility of my thought and reflection, because that was for me the true power of endurance sport. It wasn't elite athleticism, which was another big part of the transition of my life. I was like, I don't have to be a pro, even though I've built a pro team around me. It was super challenging, but my journey has very much been that of letting my environment challenge me and let that be a trigger for me to go deeper inside myself to understand why, versus trying to make the rest of the world around me fit into my comfort zone. And so through that, I rediscovered a passion for film that I had in childhood that I never was allowed to really pursue because the world told me that wasn't possible. And I've been pursuing story. I've been pursuing film. I've been pursuing Jungian psychology and all of the things that have really elevated me to this position of self-understanding, self-awareness. And through that empowerment, I've tried and failed at businesses. And right now I'm in a really great spot with understanding how I operate in all of the spheres of influence, if you want to call them spheres of influence, but in the ways that I operate, how to inhabit that space as myself. And it's really exciting. So that's, I would say, the distilled, condensed version of where I am and where I've come from.
Okay, let's flash back, if you don't mind, if you're okay with this. Through my coaching practice for endurance athletes, I noticed that a lot of children that go through a traumatic experience, they have autoimmune disease, they have psychological issues. Where do you kind of fit in that sphere after maybe even introducing some sort of inner child issue? Is that something that you've had to really adapt to and understand and learn about yourself before you even went to the Army, or was all this post? I know that's a loaded 3-part question, but
yeah, well, I mean, it all factors into it because I mean, up until the age of 8, you're trying to figure out what the world is. And so ignoring that part of my life, I made inappropriate choices for myself. And so unintentionally, I'm putting myself in environments where, you know, I'm not an initiated man. I've never had that wisdom, the elder wisdom to show this is the way. So I'm kind of bouncing back and forth trying to figure it out. And only until, you know, I was older did I stop looking at it from a victim perspective with some of the traumas that I experienced, and started to see, okay, that happened. Now I have to give it purpose. I have to give it meaning. And there was this Mary Oliver quote that was, once someone I loved handed me a box of darkness, and in time I realized it too was a gift. And when that was shared with me, it really kind of changed my perspective to go back and look at those things and process, to grieve, and to start to understand how that incident, you know, how that man abused me was influencing my marriage. It influenced my ability to be intimate or affectionate. And so kind of untying those and opening the boxes and letting that empower me to help other people who are given the similar box started to make these connections where, if I can look at this traumatic part of my life and let it empower me, what else can I do? So it was very formative to understand how childhood trauma and my understanding of the world, for better or worse, was influencing the way I operated and what I felt I needed from other people, the external validation to let me know that I was good enough. But when you're on a bike for 5 hours, ain't nobody going to tell you you're good enough. That's an internal conversation. So it was really a process of taking that conversation outside of everyone else's influence and really internalizing it, and letting the child who I had locked in a closet for many years have a voice. And that voice was almost always tearful. It was almost always victim. It was almost always fear. But when I saw this boy come up in me, and it was the, I can't do this, you know, I need to quit, you know, like on Ironman France's course, I literally zombie walked because I wanted the paramedics to pull me off the course, because that boy was coming up saying, we can't do this. But when those men didn't see me, I just kept moving forward. And the man who I've become was able to tell that boy, we're okay. I see you. I honor you. I know you're scared, but we can do this. I'm going to show you. And then I was able to put that boy on my shoulders and finish that race with just 10 minutes to spare. And it's one of the most cherished photos I have, is the boy's face crying, arms outstretched, just amazed that we accomplished this. And then I collapsed after that, you know, but that picture is cherished because it's not that I stuffed the boy away forever and just silenced him and killed him. I've integrated him. He is my sensitivity. He is my curiosity. He is my passion. The old me, the man, wants to be linear and logical, but without that boy, I am not the fullness of who I am. And learning that process has been very eye-opening.
Did you have a sense of, when you were growing up, before you went to the Army, that the boy was an anchor, and then after the triathlon, you were standing next to the boy, which is the previous version of you, and you literally could pick that person up and hug it versus having it be an anchor? Would that be a fair assessment?
Yes, I think so, because that anchor was, I didn't know it was there. You know, it's like tied to your waist and it's dragging you everywhere. You just get depressed, you feel down, and you're not even aware. It's kind of like when you're looking, if you're looking out, you can't see behind you. So sometimes you're in this dark room and the candle's right behind you, and need someone in your life to say, hey, that thing right there behind you, you should turn around. You're kind of getting dragged back by this. And so that was when I got my service dog, Bahesha, her name was the first to show me that. And until then, I didn't realize I had the anchor.
Powerful. How did the service dog help you?
In many ways, the first reason I did it was because of nightmares and PTSD and TBI and those symptoms. So she actually alerted me before I went into the nightmare. And I remember that first night, she actually was just standing over me, and I woke up like, well, what's going on? And then she told me,
why are you standing over me?
Yeah, like, this is almost scarier. You're gonna eat my face. But the Bahesha told me that that was her sensing a nightmare. I was moving, whatever, and she stopped me. And so the nightmares really subsided after that. But the next evolution of that was twofold. First was, I can't express myself. I think it's common for a lot of men that we don't know how to express those vulnerable feelings because we're fearing judgment. The dog's not going to do that. So I could hurt my wife, I could hurt my children with the words that I want to say, but my dog is just going to look at me and put her paw on my shoulder and say, I love you, you know? And so it was a one-sided conversation. I could get it out. And then as you get out the venom, the vile things that you want to say, you get to the real underlying thing. And usually that's how I can then go and be like, well, that's not fair. What's really going on here? And so she helped me do that, as well as take me out into crowds. I was afraid of crowds. And when you look at your dog, when I look at Maddie, she was a little bit insecure. And there's a reason that Bahesha paired me with an insecure, not a scared dog, but one that needed a little bit more leadership, because she knew I was lacking that ability to lead. And so when I projected my own fears onto the dog and helped her, like, hey, Maddie, we're going to get through this. I know this is like really scary, but we're going to do it. We're going to go out from here all the way over there for no other reason than just to do it. And I walked her through it. And then all of a sudden I sit down with her. We did it. Like, that was awesome. We celebrated that. Good job. Good job. And she's like, oh, this is so exciting. I didn't realize I was talking to myself until months later, where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm talking to her, but that is me. And through that, all of a sudden I felt confidence and I felt leadership. And, you know, I was responsible for a platoon of 2 or a squad of 2. And through that process, I was able to then not need her as much, because then I started to want to converse with people instead of having them come up to me and say, oh, what a pretty dog. Can I pet it? And, you know, I was like, my eyes are up here. Eyes up here. Thank you. You know?
If you don't mind, let's back up just a little bit, because I think that the service dog came after you were in the Army, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So tell us about your experience in the Army. First of all, you have this, let's just, for the sake of the conversation, let's just call it your anchor. Whether you're on the ocean or whether you're on land, it doesn't matter. It's still there. When you got into the Army, first of all, you were seeking some sort of validation, not only for yourself internally, but also external validation. Where did the Army help? And then tell us about the timeline of getting a TBI, which I'll be completely transparent. I've had TBI. I've suffered from it. I've had to do a lot of work to kind of fix. That's a terrible word. To adapt to my TBI. Fix is not the right word, because I think we're always kind of challenged to fix ourselves. And that resonated because you said fix. Mm-hmm. And to us, it's a journey. It's not fixing, it's a journey. Tell us a little bit about how the Army influenced, and then the TBI, how that kind of, did it spiral you? Did it give you intrinsic thoughts? Kind of walk us through that.
Yeah. So the Army, when I went into it, you know, I thought I wanted to be an airborne ranger, because that was like in my mind, the peak of masculinity. Yeah. And so when I get out, I am going to have no one will be able to question that I'm a man, because I was an airborne ranger. But my recruiter was like, you have allergies, you have asthma, I can't put in the packet, because if you fail out, I'm going to get in trouble. So no. And I said, okay, infantry. And that's the next most manly thing to do. And he said, still can't, a lot of road marching. So I don't want you to do that either. It's like, come on. And so he said, artillery. So I was like, okay, I'll be an artillery guy. Still get to blow stuff up. I'm combat operations, you know, great. And so there was that anchor as well in my head saying, I might be doing these things, but also it's not airborne ranger, right? You know? And so then that really messed with me and made me already set up to fail, honestly, to be like, this isn't doing it for me. And then you get into the Army and you realize that it's a lot of raking rocks, picking up cigarette butts. It's not rappelling down buildings. It's, you know, not the grand excitement that I thought it would be. But what it did provide was a kid from Wisconsin who grew up in a 95% white town, exposure to other races, other cultures, where I almost pretty close to being the minority in my unit. My squad I was the only white guy in it. And so some of these guys had been, you know, on their last row where the judge said, either you go to jail or you go to the Army. Yeah. There were a lot of different reasons that I found that people came to this organization that weren't just, I want to know what it is to be a man, or, you know, the pseudo patriotism and like, I want to serve my country. Yes, you do. But what's underneath that? And so I started to learn all these different cultures and be exposed to this. And that was a shocking revelation, honestly, but it was broadening my horizons. So that was the first thing that really shocked me, was like, wow, I was really sheltered. What else don't I know about this world? And then you get deployed, and then your bond is even driven closer. And I've had this one moment where, I don't know why it was, but this general came into Balad, Iraq, where I was at the time. and asked for 1 or 2 soldiers from every unit. And we had this big luncheon, and we had to each go through and say, what has it meant to you to be in war? Which is a super
Oh, wow.
loaded question. Like, okay,
God.
let me distill that one down. But when it came to my turn, I said that this is for the first time in my life, in just a matter of months, I've experienced the full range of human emotion, from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows, and sometimes within the period of a day. So war taught me from that level just the breadth of emotion that we can experience of human beings, and how to transition from one to the other, a skill I wouldn't develop until later in life. Even now, I'm still working on it, but in war, you are in a microcosm of an alternate universe almost. And so that was a really transformative experience for me. And honestly, seeing some men step up to protect me as a lower enlisted, my sergeants standing up for me, it was refreshing to see a man stand up for me in a healthy way. But it was still a little bit wishy-washy. There was a lot of things that were happening that were hard to make sense of, because I realized now I didn't know who I was. So it was hard to stand on firm ground when I don't know who I am and what I believe. And that was made more difficult when I got my TBI. You know, I was in a couple of IEDs, which are explosions in the road, essentially knocked me unconscious. And on a third occasion, I was, it's not combat related, but it sucks because I want it to be a better story. But I was in the gunner's hatch. So I'm standing up behind this 50 cal. We're driving, and our driver is short. So the visor that blocks the sun isn't blocking the sun from his eyes on this morning. And so we're driving at 40 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour, like usual. And we have these checkpoints, which is highway dividers that you have to serpentine between to slow traffic so you can, you know, inspect the vehicles. He doesn't see it. I see it. So I'm like, hey, stop. Bam, head on collision right into this highway divider. I flip over the 50 cal. I'm in a cartwheel, and everything goes black. And I was out for 2 minutes or so. And when I woke up, I was sitting next to the tire. The driver's like, you okay? You okay? You okay? Because he was scared that he was going to get in trouble, you know, and that he had hurt me, whatever. But, you know, they triaged me. Can you walk? I said, yeah. Okay, get back in the gunner's hatch. We'll send you to the medic when we get to Baghdad. That was 8 hours. I was just kind of dazed in this concussed statement with a 50 cal machine gun. And then I never got saw. And it was just everything after that moment. I would say that's the biggest thing that happened that really sticks with me now, was part of my brain was damaged. And I didn't understand why I couldn't do some of the things that I used to be able to do. And when you lose that intellect or that ability to do basic things that should be very simple, it's really, really hard. And I think as much as PTSD drove me, PTSD and TBI are very interconnected, and it's hard to determine what is actually causing it. So when I got out and I did all of the work, I still had these hangups and these random emotional outbursts and frustrations that spiraled me into depression because I can't remember where the dishes go, or, you know, things that were very simple once are now very challenging. And it was a long process to accept that some of that stuff's not coming back. But I've also worked really hard to get to a point where I've understood where my limitations are, which factors into almost everything I do now, in a not an unhealthy way, but a realistic way. My wife is often the one that says, yes, but remember, and I'm like, damn it, you're right. Like, I can't expect to be that version of myself that could do anything easily, seemingly on the first try, because that's gone to a certain, and I appear very well put together. I can articulate, I can have expressive thought, but if you lived with me, you would see a whole lot of limitations that nobody gets to see, which in a way makes me feel, I don't know how to say it, but it's like tough when no one can see.
Right.
You know,
like you see me, but you don't see me. Yeah,
I do struggle on a daily basis. It's just not in this arena. This is the arena where I feel most comfortable, because my rational brain has been damaged more than my creative brain, and connecting with my creative, expressive nature is what I must do to tie in any entrepreneurial task, even cooking. If I play music, sing, and dance, I can cook, but if I just try to read a menu, I can't do it.
I'm trying to find the scope of how to ask this question. When I had my injuries, when I was racing back when I was 30 years old, I didn't realize it was a concussion. Just get on my bike, So at the state championships and the Masters race, I had a big crash. Woke up, some of my teammates were looking over me. I was like, I'm fine. Next day I went to race again, crashed again, lost half of my helmet. Didn't even realize that I lost half of my helmet. Going through the feed zone, I was like, that wasn't good. Happened again. Same thing happened again a few years later. And then the latest one I had, I started identifying, like the EMT, when he came up to me, I said, don't deal with me, deal with the person over there. I've got a concussion. Did you get to a point where you're like, okay, if I had bumped my head or whatever, I can identify and know that I have either a small or a larger concussion?
I had a couple in high school wrestling, and this one felt different. And it was like, maybe it's the difference, and I don't know, maybe it was the difference between low level versus higher level brain trauma. But I feel bad saying this. I I was a stoic child, and that was how I was praised and honored. That was how I identified love, as my ability to embrace pain and not complain about it. The army further reinforces this, the suck it up and drive
Wow.
on mentality. So what I did is I ignored every symptom that I could, even my knee injury, my shoulder, all the neck, and all of that stuff that I knew there was something wrong, but I was able to somehow tell myself a story that it wasn't, and it was what everyone's experiencing, because people praised me in the military for that toughness. Whatever the injury was, get some Motrin and you drive on, and then you hide all those symptoms, knowing, even though you don't, that everyone else is experiencing the same thing. It's kind of like Eric Hill told me about the race. Everyone is riding the same course. So don't complain about the course, because we're all experiencing it. And it was a fallacy for me to believe that everyone is experiencing this pain. So even my doctor's like, "Are you in pain?" I'm like, "No, just the normal pain." And the doctor's like, "Well, normal pain isn't a thing." I'm like, "Oh, it's not?" And so I have ignored it for a long time. And until I went through polytrauma, and they were like, "You've been knocked out 3 times and blah, blah, blah." Yeah. And then take this test. And I'm like, "Oh man, I'm struggling with some of these test things and counting backwards in numbers." And I'm like, my wife and the doctor are laughing almost, because I'm skipping 25 numbers from, and they're like, you know what you're supposed to do?" I'm like, "Yeah, why?" And I couldn't even see it. So there's some blindness that I have to my own limitations, as well as that suck it up and drive on, you're fine, that doesn't allow me to accept there's problems. Even when I'm bench pressing and I feel that pain in my neck, until now, I push through it, because I'm like, "No, you just got to lift," because that's just your body saying, "I want to quit." But now I have to accept, like, those symptoms are a big deal, but I haven't listened to them for many years.
I'm going to give you an analogy and tell me what your thoughts are. You've got a broken arm. Everybody's like, "Oh man, you've got a broken arm. How long is it going to take to heal?" 6 weeks. You've got a TBI. You don't have a roadmap. What are your thoughts?
Oh my gosh, that is so good, because that is so true. Uh, my thoughts now, compared to what they were, my thoughts were, uh, that's not real. You're able to do everything you used to be able to do, and if you can't, you're not trying hard enough. So grind harder. And now my thoughts are, that's real. My mother-in-law just had a stroke, and she's the first person in the family that can understand what it is like to have a loss of function and that rebuilding process. My process is, what I think I should say is, it may never come back. What are you going to do about it? And that's where I'm at, is what am I going to do about it with my limitations? If it never comes back, I'm going to keep working on it. And it's going to be a lifetime. I get it. But I'm not going to sacrifice the short-term gains that I can make, and the progress and the investment I can make in myself and others, because of the TBI. But I am going to accept that there will be barriers that I have. And it's not a 6-week thing. It's not a 6-year thing. It's I hope it all comes back. But if it doesn't, here's what I can do now.
Whenever I get a client, whether it's consulting or coaching or whatever, and I showed you this before, I have them draw on I myself draw in the middle of the page 3 separate sections, and that's why we call it the 33 rule. 33.3% is your personal life, 33.3% is your professional life, and 33.3% is your exercise, your triathlon, your meditation, your yoga. But at no point in any time is it ever 33.3%? You're always begging, stealing, borrowing for one to help out the others. Did you find when you were going through, and I don't mean to have a, a stamp on this to go, hey, your 33 rule, Eric, is this, this, and this, but where were you during before you went into the Army, during the Army, and then after the Army with your 33%? Were you pulling on the personal side for so many years because you didn't know how to fix problems?
Yes, I would say that's 100% accurate. From before the Army, my personal pulling, it was all reflective of me and how I was perceived. I was a chameleon. I tried to fit in with everybody. I was also the funny guy. And if I couldn't make you laugh, I was myself feeling like I shouldn't even be here. I'm a waste of space. So I did physical things, but it was all personal. It was all relationship based. That's how I defined myself. And in the military that carried over, but it added physical. So, and there was no entrepreneurial, there was, I had no ambitions that way. I didn't even know that was a thing that I could do, but it was then the physical and the emotional, relational aspects. And then when I left, it went back to no physical, none, to all relationship, to all connection, and whatever I need to do to get it, I will do. Whether it's drinking, drugging, whether it's running from the cops, getting into fights, whatever you need for me to fit into this group, I'm going to do it. And I totally judged myself and what I needed to do based on what I was hearing at the parties about. Yeah, Eric Beach, and it was some terrible things that were honoring in me. And it was only until later that, I got married and started to have that entrepreneur side that started to come up. But now I mean, there's been times where I've totally shut off entrepreneur or, physicality for injury's sake or whatever it is. So I totally resonate with the borrowing. Sometimes it's like one disappears for a season. I know it's not forever, but I have to figure out these two pieces, my family and my physical health, because if I can't do that, I can't be an entrepreneur. And if I invest too much into entrepreneur, my family will hurt, and they have hurt because I've overinvested into that. That one always has to come as my third. If the other two are balanced and I'm doing okay, and I say balance isn't equal, balance means both.
Right. Did you feel at times that when you were trying to have that balance or synergy between, and we'll talk about your entrepreneurial spirit as it manifested itself post TBI, well, not post, when you were starting to understand TBI, PTSD, did you feel like you were a dog chasing your tail at times? Like you thought you had an answer, but yet you found yourself full circle back into the same situations?
Yeah, everything was the answer. Everything that came into my mind that I was excited about was absolutely the end all be all thing that was going to be my life's purpose. And it never was, because life's purpose isn't wrapped in a vocation or a thing that you do. It's about living and growing every day and investing in learning and connecting with people. And so I absolutely failed so many times, and I got fired from 2 jobs. And every time that happened, I would start back at square one. You ascend this mountain, you fall off of it, and you get back up. And you're like, oh, there, I need to go up there. And you climb up it, and then you fall off of it. You wake up. I mean, that was my version of a dog chasing his tail, but that hurt so bad.
Yeah.
Because every time I failed, I was like, that was the thing. How many more times can I fail before my wife leaves me? I had those conversations with her, and she's like, I'm not going to leave you. I want you healthy and well. And that's one of the biggest blessings I've had is my wife.
Did you feel some sense of guilt when your wife would say that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that's partly the, what the gender role of a man is in a marriage was the provider. And she, I think, embodied the feminine of that, where she wanted a provider. But the funny thing about my failing was that it opened up her mind to what she could achieve and what she could do. And now she is the provider. She is the warrior that goes and conquers business, and she is thriving. So in a weird way, that guilt I felt was almost now the guilt that I wasn't aware that I had to step back and really go in and let her go and support her, so that I could then kind of find my path, bounce around a little bit. And then it was all good. Like, she is very happy, and we are happier now that I've gotten rid of that guilt, where it was like, I don't need to do anything other than love and support you. And I invest in her. Like, we have really hard conversations, and I've opened her mind in certain ways. So in a way, like, I'm like, isn't that leadership? I mean, what that's love, right? It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, investing yourself for someone's spiritual growth and development. That's love. That's marriage for me.
What was the hardest thing for you? One of the hardest things for me is that I felt like I had let my family down by not recognizing that I had TBI, and I was doing things that I shouldn't have been doing. First of all, like emceeing events like 6 months after having a TBI, with the music extremely loud, 30,000 people. And after the event, it would take me like a week to recover from that. And I just didn't lean into it. I was like, Chad, you're doing more damage here than you are doing good. Were there multiple points in your life where you felt that as well?
I have felt that. I can't say before the Army how many of those occurred, but after the Army with my wife is where I really became aware of it. And there's two, I'd say, big moments. One of them was drinking. And part of that was because, not that I'm an alcoholic, but it creates such a brain fog for me that it takes a long time for that to clear. And so after I would drink, I would be not much fun, and I'd feel down, and I feel like I can't be around people because I can't process. It's hard for me to process conversation with multiple people to begin with. And with that brain fog, it sucked. And it also created a different personality in me. And so through sobriety, my wife has gained trust. And so that's why I could be at team camp, because she knows I'm going to go there and not drink. And when I drink, things would happen that weren't of who I was. So that was one. And the other one, I guess, would be training related. I mentally learned to compare myself to the pro athletes of Project Echelon. And when I started to compare myself really well, I realized I want to do what they're doing. And then I look at their discipline, their dietary habits, their training loads, their recovery systems. I would try to embody those, but my brain had such a hard time not prioritizing, but scheduling and following schedule, that I would fall off. And then I would go do Ironman Wisconsin, Ironman France as a severely undertrained athlete. And I would pay for that like I had the flu for a month after these intense efforts. So I started to be this gritty dude, but it was really because I couldn't mentally comprehend and process and build the systems that allowed me to have these efforts. So in a way, it caused a lot of tension because I was unhealthy doing it. I was unhappy, and I was bitter towards my family because they wouldn't give me the space and time to do these things. Ultimately, I wasn't supposed to be doing them at that level. And the TBI, clouds that even further, and that creates even stronger emotional responses. So I had to separate myself from any races on my calendar, any ambitions physically, and just strictly remove it and downgrade it. Not that it's a downgrade, but to accept that I'm just trying to be healthy. And that's it.
You were pulling the stoicism from your childhood straight into your training.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. I mean, I love the comments after my Ironman France of how gritty I was, of how I can do anything. Because up until that point, the longest bike ride I've done was 56 miles. So I upped that to 112 in the mountain, which I'd never done. I had ran 14.4 miles and then upgraded that to a marathon. I had done the swim 2.4 miles, but I doubled most of those events, and then was really proud that, my kidneys were shutting down because I'm such a badass. I'm so tough. And I paid for that. Everything has a cost. And I was paying a foolish cost for my own stoic ego gratification of, look at me and how tough I am. I might not have been an Army Ranger, but look at what I did in the mountains. I'm a man. I'm going to have the flu for the next month and a half, but I'm a man.
I don't want to, I'm not going to open up this Pandora's box because this could be another time, but David Goggins' book just resonated immediately to me. But we are not going to go into that, but it's like, I'm sure you have some thoughts on that. Talk to me about Project Echelon and how it's helped you and how you've helped it.
I love Project Echelon because it wasn't a thing when Eric and I created it. It was simply me trying to figure out how to bring physicality back into my life. And accidentally, as I'm running, as I'm riding, I'm climbing a hill, and all of a sudden these emotions come out, and I start to see, I want to quit at 90% of the way up this hill. And so I'm like, every time I get 90% of the way up this hill, I want to quit. Why? No matter how I'm feeling, always at 90%. Well, where else in my life am I wanting to quit? And I was like, everything when it gets to the nitty gritty final details where it's a lot more analytical, a lot less creative, I want to quit. I don't want to do the project. I don't want to do it anymore. And so I started to find that there was these parallels in my life found on the course. Just like you mentioned, the stoicism. I want to be gritty. I don't want to be well trained because I want to just gut it out.
Feel it.
And I want to feel it. I want to feel those fires. And that's good. That's okay. It just couldn't be the sustainable method of life. Like that's not what our bodies are meant for. That's like survival versus, thriving. And so it really helped me learn lessons that way. Plus, I was a better person when I got off of a ride, when I did it healthy. I was able to play with my children and I just found a change in me. So it really became this daily practice, not daily, but this discipline that was a spine in my life that all of the growth of muscle could attach to and carry forward regardless of what I was doing, whether I was making a movie, writing a book, whether I was not doing any of it, while I was mentoring, whether I was learning, I had my bike, I had my run, and that was with me no matter what. And so it gave me consistency, plus it gave me purpose and understanding now in my endeavors that, from an entrepreneurial side, I, as a TBI guy, and even without it, I can't do everything. I'm not meant to do everything. I'm meant to follow in purpose of what I am, where I'm strong, and then have Eric Hill just blow it up in ways that he can, that I can't. Because if I try to do what he does, the thing lasts a year and I'm burned out and depressed again. And so that's kind of the core of what it's done for me from a very foundational standpoint.
When you talk about Project Echelon, for those of you who don't know Project Echelon, well, instead of me telling everybody, what is Project Echelon?
We educate, equip, and empower veterans through endurance sport. And we basically give them mentorship. We teach them, because when I started, I didn't have a bike. I didn't know how to run or swim really well. I hadn't done any of those things. So it's a very ominous thing to want to go. Like, you might want to do physicality, but you don't know how to get to it. You're just kind of in there moving stuff. Like, I'm just going to go run real hard, right? That's how we do it. Like, no, there's a structured plan, but here's how you do it. There's costs associated with it. Maybe that's a roadblock. So we wanted to create it as a way to remove all those barriers for veterans to get into endurance sport and start to feel that vitality surge back into their lives. And so those are the ways we do it. And it's been, I would say, a real growing experience. So we're doing more. We had a grand fundo where everyone came together and rode together. So there's this community aspect of it as well that we try to foster, where you're not alone. We're all trying to seek to better our lives. And unless you engage in that community, you're only going to be this lone wolf athlete at best, which is maybe better than you were. But we're ushering in community so that we can all be together and realize that through community, we can feel held and heard, and our voice can be empowered. And when we use our voice, we remove shame that surrounds our heart. And so that's where we've been trapped. And that physicality builds the endorphins to actually allow you to empower yourself in these other areas of growth.
Why bring a bunch of 20, 21, 22, 23-year-old elite cyclists into this fold?
I don't know. I ask myself that every day. They are so foundational because they go places that I can't go. They have platforms where I don't have one. When you have these, and it's twofold, that's one fold. I'll get to the second part after that. They go to all these places around the nation. They win races. They perform well at races. They speak at races. And through all of the nation, they're allowing our message to be shared. And there's just something cool about a pro athlete, like someone who is elite at what they do, and watching them and realize they're doing it for you, that they're inspired by you, even if they don't know you, because they do it with a mission. Like, it's one thing to have a team, but it's one thing to have a team with a mission. And they share that mission with people and they grow from it. So not only am I excited to see these young kids grow and understand that service is such a vital part of their rest of their future, and elite athletes, I can say that some of them are addicts themselves. Some of them, if that sport was to go away, what would they do? And so in a way, I like the idea of Project Echelon giving back to them so that they have community, they have service opportunities, so that if they lose the sport they love, if they retire from the sport they love, they still have a place. You know what I mean? So there's that element as well. And I think they're incredibly vital because of what they provide and what we can provide them, because it's a mutual situation. The veterans give back to the riders give back to the veterans.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool thing I got to see, is all these 22-year-old elite cyclists riding with veterans, and it was just powerful. I mean, I was out on the road. I wasn't riding. I was out on the road with Lauren Hall, your director sportif, and it's pretty powerful, and they're devoted. I have to say, not only they're devoted, the veterans are, but they're committed because they see the process. But how do you explain to a 21-year-old youthful, exuberant, strong young man or young woman what TBI and PTSD is?
Well, I've learned how not to do it, and it's a big part of it is on their own time. When we started it,
Don't
this
come
has
in
been
with guns blazing.
dude. Yeah, I did that. Like, it was a point of tension for me. It was to help through self-discovery, and I'm like, let's get to the self-discovery. And then I remember Eric Hill saying, because I was blind to it, and he said, you've got to understand, like, there are 21-year-old riders who don't know anything about war, don't know anything about depression, suicide, addiction, and they're going, whoa, I'm freaked out. Like, I'm responsible for their life. It's like, oh, no, 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 no. But that was like my push, was like to really get deep into this, because that's what worked for me. And so what I have to realize is that these 20-year-olds, what works for me doesn't work for them. It might for some of them. And God bless the ones that, want to dig in deeper right away and are hungry for it. That's fantastic. But I also appreciate that it's just community. It's just asking a question. It's just hearing and not trying to have the answer of, like, if someone's depressed, here's how I save their life. Because as much as you want to save someone's life, it's theirs to save. My life was mine to save. And all I want is to show and create a space, and I've backed off a lot on this, is just to be able to come together, have some veterans with some civilians, and let them just converse about whatever they want to converse about. And then we can talk. And if you have questions, ask those questions. We'll talk about it offline from someone who is in a healthy standpoint, not someone who's in active trauma, who is just starting their journey. Because when we share from our scars, it's healthy. When we share from our wounds, we bleed over everybody, and that can be suffocating.
Oh, that is a powerful statement. I'm going to have to borrow that one. So Project Echelon kind of goes into all three aspects of the 33 rule, but tell us a little bit about how your entrepreneurship kind of just blossomed after, I'm assuming before starting Project Echelon, but during Project Echelon as well. Where did that whole spirit come to round out your 33 rule?
That was the self-discovery piece for me. Was I had tried some things. My wife started a photography business, and I started doing video for it, and she ran the books and all that stuff. And that was good exploration for me. But when I tried to launch my own business, it collapsed within, inside a year. It was just not a great situation for me. Then Project Echelon started, and that became a proving ground for my own mettle of a business side, where I was a vision caster and I loved that role. And then I wanted to be more involved. So Eric was really the executive director, making all the things happen, taking my vision and inspiration and using that to craft what we were doing. And I wanted to get more involved, and he graciously understood that I had limitations and let me serve where I wanted to serve and where I felt I could. And he knew very well that it might not last. Like, I'm not going to build a program like, this is now Eric Beach Tuesdays, or, whatever, and say this is going to happen every Tuesday. And I had to learn that I was exploring, I was experimenting, but not putting too much responsibility on my shoulder, and letting myself continue to discover who I am through different healing programs, through reading, through my writing, and what conversations came up on the bike and on the run. And then I got to a certain point, which, I'd say maybe in the last couple of years, where I really figured out kind of the core of all of my failures. Like, I looked at all the things that I failed at, but still loved and wanted to do. And it's like, maybe there's a little regret there. Not that I want to do it, but I realized that underlying pin of storytelling. I'm a storyteller. So it was really down to defining purpose in my life of what it is at a foundational level do I need to be connected to for any entrepreneurial endeavor to succeed for me. And that was, as long as I'm telling stories. And that could be my own story. That can be a grim fairy tale. That can be a movie, a screenplay, a novel. That can be self-development through the Jungian archetypes, which are a huge foundational point for me, the king, warrior, magician, lover, and how all those houses work together. That's how I'm constantly looking at myself and my team that I build around me. So that's been my path. And then now that I'm realizing that I can't do anything alone, like that's not my speed, I just can't do that, and I'm accepting those limitations, I've been able to slowly build something that is sustainable. Because when I don't do these things, it crumbles. It might blow up fast and people get really excited because maybe I have value, and I feel like I have value to share. I can give, but I will burn out really fast if I'm not careful. And through that process of learning where I burn out and what those situations that have to be there for me to burn out, I can avoid those and say, let me build a team. And so that's been a foundational realization recently.
Fabulous insight. All right, one final question for you. It's 50 years from now, and you and I are both taking a dirt nap, and your children are grown. What's one paragraph that you would hope that they would write to you and put on your tombstone that they see in you?
That's a really good question. Just a paragraph. I would say that my daddy made time for me to figure out who I was and told me that I could do anything I wanted to do as long as I was willing to work hard at it and push through the boring, push through the mundane, and know that when he made a mistake, he was man enough to apologize and let me know that that was on him, and that daddy was working on it. And I'll borrow a quote from an author who wrote, a child doesn't need dragon stories to know that dragons are real. The dragons, they know they're real. Children need dragon stories to know that the dragon can be defeated. My child know that PTSD is real. I don't have to tell her what PTSD is. I just need to show her that it can be defeated and that daddy's working on it.
That, my friend, is a incredible insight. I can't thank you enough. Eric, tell us how we can find more about Project Echelon and what you've got going on.
Well, Instagram, Facebook, the gram, go to the gram at Project Echelon Racing is our handle, and projectechelonracing.org is our website. And we are very active. I mean, so it doesn't take much digging to figure out what we're up to, but there's a whole race calendar you can follow. And when we go to races, we like to meet the people who believe in our vision and want to support it. And it's a very rewarding thing for us. And that is the best place that you can find out and get involved. Send us a message and an email. Let us know what you need. Let us know what you feel. Even just throw the guys on the racing team an appreciation that I can't express it enough. I want more people to see the racers, see the riders, and just thank them for what they do. It's going to help them understand the mission. It's going to help them serve more. It's going to help them when the pain gets really tough and the muscles are burning and the vision has to be at the forefront of their mind to push through that barrier that they're suffering. And, you know, and one thing that I always like to tell them when I get a chance is that when your muscles burn and you want to quit, let that be a call for those who have committed suicide, those who are no longer here anymore, urging you to do the one thing that they can no longer do, and that's live. Simply move your body because they can't anymore. And one of the greatest ways we can honor our dead and those we have lost is by doing what they can and just living our life to the best of our ability.
Eric Beach, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
See ya.